I won't let you go until you bless me. There's got to be a resolve on the inside of the church. Woo, glory!
Yo, what's up? I'm Joe Marshall, Creative Director of VCMI DC. I'm here to let you know that starting in February, we are launching a brand new event just for you, and it's called the Comedy Lab. Yeah, it's gonna be a live stand-up comedy show
featuring myself and some of the best comedians in the DMV.
God has a sense of humor, so why can't we? So I want you to get your tickets today. You can get them at vcmi-dc1.org, or you can scan the QR code on the screen right now. The Comedy Lab. Clean jokes, real topics, great laughs. We'll see you on Friday, February 23rd at 8 p.m., but the doors open at 7:30.
Victory family, it is time to come home. Join the midweek Bible study small groups as we focus on family life. Small groups will be held in person only for the month of February. We look forward to meeting you here each week at 7 p.m.
Welcome to Victory and welcome to our 2024 Black History Month celebration, celebrating African Americans who've made an impact on our culture. This year we're celebrating milestones in Black history. 1619. 1619 brought slavery to the United States. In the 1700s, anti-slavery Northerners began helping enslaved people escape the North using a network of safe houses. This was called the Underground Railroad, led by the great Harriet Tubman. In 1831, William Lloyd Garrison, a journalist who founded the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, became known as the most radical of America's anti-slavery activists. In August of 1831, Nat Turner struck fear in the hearts of white Southerners by leading the only effective slave rebellion in U.S. history. Turner inherited a passionate hatred of slavery to see himself as anointed by God to lead his people out of bondage. The early 20th centuries brought the Harlem Renaissance. The Cotton Club was one of the most successful night venues of the Harlem Renaissance, with artists such as composer Duke Ellington, bandleader Cab Calloway, Bessie Smith, the Empress of Blues, jazz great Louis Armstrong, and one of the greatest writers of all time, Langston Hughes. 1941, African Americans in World War II. African Americans fought what was called the Four Freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. 1957. In 1957, after the Supreme Court declared segregation of public schools illegal in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas was integrated. 1963. In 1963, over 250,000 people participated in the March on Washington, where the speech, "I Have a Dream," was spoken by Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. 1964. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. 1972. Representative Shirley Chisholm of New York became a national symbol of freedom and opportunity as the first major party African American candidate and the first female candidate for President of the United States. 2001. As the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vietnam veteran and four-star U.S. Army General Colin Powell, the first black Secretary of State. 2008. Barack Obama was inaugurated as the 44th President of the United States. He is the first African American to hold that office. 2021. Kamala Harris became the first woman and first woman of color to become the Vice President of the United States. 2023. Recently named to Time's most influential people in artificial intelligence, Timnit Gebru has become an icon in responsible artificial intelligence. She is the founder and executive director of the Distributed AI Research Institute, as well as the co-founder of Black AI, a community of black researchers working in the field. Let's continue to honor those who are making an impact in our culture as we celebrate Black History Month 2024.
Hello, and welcome to our Victory Midweek Bible Study service. We are so glad that you decided to join us in today and be a part of our special service. Before we get into the things for tonight, we want to take time to recite the vision of our house. Say it with me. The Spirit of the Lord is upon us, and He has anointed us to preach the gospel and to raise up a body of believers to be the church of our Lord Jesus Christ, a church without walls. Our goals are to teach the Word of God so that at any time we can see the Word, hear the Word, and understand the Word of God. We can be converted into that Word that we see, hear, and understand. And once we are converted, we can now strengthen our brethren and as witnesses declare with boldness, as Jesus is, so are we in this world. As much as we love that you've tuned in here, look, if you're in the area, it's not too late to come and meet us in the house at your location. We're doing something special in the house, but it's only for those who come in person, where we're having special small groups for both married and single people. So meet us here if you can. Look, tonight we are kicking off February with a special series on relationships and family life. And we have a group of men of different ages, both married and single, that are going to be discussing some important questions in regards to relationships. So let's just join in on the conversation and just grab some nuggets that God wants to get to us tonight.
Well, I want to welcome you once again to another Mighty Men of Valor panel, and we've been talking about relationships, and one thing I realize is that we don't know very much about relationships, except that we've had to be thrown into the fire and then come out with some kind of thoughts about what relationships look like, how to make them work. And so I've put together this great panel, and so that we can talk about it. I have single people, I got married people, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with my left here.
Charles Robinson, otherwise known as Butch.
Aaron.
My name is Rick Pena, and I'm from the Woodbridge campus.
My name is Raja Hilliard, and I'm from the Suitland campus.
Ian Clark from the Woodbridge, Suitland, and all over.
And so these guys are going to help me to possibly answer some questions that you're having. I know that the last panel discussion we had, we were given some questions that we would love to answer. But before we get to those, I want to just kind of set the mood for this. And let's talk about, what the climate of relationships look like today. And I want to get that from a perspective from singles as well as the married people. And so I want to ask the single men, what does the climate of relationships look like today for single people?
Go ahead, Mr. Brazelton.
The climate of relationships today, it is, I think that most things don't change significantly from the past, but I do think that there's a little bit of differences. You have technology now and social media. You have all of these forms of, false intimacy, quick relationships. It doesn't take as much to, get a chance to know somebody or to feel like you know somebody. And so that plays a role into, I think, people my age's ability to develop relationships and to kind of find and have genuine connections. And that can be a hurdle that I think we uniquely face today that may not have been present in the past.
I would definitely have to agree with Aaron. I think we lack a lot of, today, a lot of times there's a lack of communication within relationships. There's a lack of taking the time to develop an intimate relationship and actually respecting who a person is, where that person comes from, what their background is about. It seems like today, relationships are microwave relationships where you just take something, you put it in a microwave for 30 seconds to a minute, and it comes out, and you either eat it or you throw it away. And I think that's kind of like the climate that we have with relationships today.
Microwavable.
Yes.
I got another question, to the single men. As single men, how important is it for you to work through problems with your potential mate, and when do you move on?
I'll start. I think it's really, really important for us to work through problems immediately. When a problem arises, I think it's an opportunity and a time for us to address what's going on inwardly with ourselves. Especially like with my girlfriend, I've realized that if we're going to do life together and if we're committed to building a relationship of intimacy and working in harmony with one another, it's important for us to address those concerns, address those if any red flags pop up, or just any type of problems that may arise, so that we can have good communication, so that we can have good relations to one another. And I think it's time to move on. I think it depends on the situation when it's time to move on regarding something. Like, for example, if she expects for me to plan a date night twice a month, like I'm responsible for planning a date night twice a month and she's responsible for planning a date night twice a month. If I miss the mark maybe 1 month and don't take ownership of planning a date night, and she picks up the slack and ends up planning 4 date nights and such, I think it's time to move on in a sense as far as, excuse me, let me get my thoughts together. Like, for example, if I was badgering, if she was getting too upset about me not planning something, like if she was getting too upset with me not making sure things come together, like it might be appropriate for her to just pick up the mantle and say, okay, I see you must got a lot of different things going on right now. You must have a lot of different things on your plate, but I know that you actually do care about me. So I'm going to pick up these next 2 weeks and stuff, and I'm actually going to plan something out. So yes.
So my question is, for you personally, when is it time for you to move on?
Are you saying move on from the relationship,
yes,
or move on
when
from
you
the
have,
problem? Okay, move on from the relationship is...
You move on from the relationship. When you have problems in your relationship, and how important it is to work on them, but when do you decide to move on?
I think that relationships are difficult. You are building something together with another person, and so obviously you're going to have problems that come up with that. The more intimate you are with someone, the more you see yourself, parts of yourself that you didn't see, and you'll see parts of them that you didn't see. And confronting those parts of yourself can be very difficult, whether it's alone or with other people. And so I think it's important to work with the other person to better each other. Iron sharpens iron. It's the point of the relationship. But where where the cutoff line is, when okay, this is no longer healthy, is if you start to sacrifice, I think, 2 things. If you start to sacrifice the foundation of your relationship, so the purpose of why you're together, the God who brought you two together, if you start to sacrifice those values, whether it's you or the other person, then it's time to move on for sure. You are now losing a core part, a foundation for what you're building, so it doesn't matter what you build on top of it, it's going to fall. And then the second thing, if a clear way for you to know, okay, it's time to move on, is if you are sacrificing yourself. If God has placed something inside of you, if you know that you're a certain type of person, like, ain't everybody gonna like you, and that's okay. But knowing that that is a part of who you are, that is good, that is meant to be there, that you shouldn't be losing that. Getting rid of it for the sake of a relationship is not going to do you well in the long run. It's just going to cause you a lot of pain and strife, because you're never going to feel fulfilled, because you'll never really feel like yourself. You'll never really be able to come to completion for who you are. So you can't be good for you, you can't be good for the relationship.
I like that. That opens the question up to the married men. As married men, it's important to work through your problems. We agree, right? My question is, why do men struggle with going to counseling?
Well, I would say, Dad, that one of the clear reasons is pride, right? Because at the end of the day, for me to go to counseling, I have to acknowledge that there's something wrong. I can't solve a problem unless I first identify or at least acknowledge the problem. So for me to go to counseling, I'm acknowledging that there's a problem. I would say that a lot of men, myself included, I'll throw myself in that boat. I would rather not have to acknowledge that problem, right? So for me to go there is me acknowledging that I need help that is external to me, and that I need counsel that is external to me. And a lot of men, even myself, I would rather feel like I could solve this myself. And so I would say pride has to be one of the major issues, right? Because now I'm saying, man, I'm not good enough to solve this, so I have to go. And then another problem is that when you introduce, for men, they don't like this. I know I don't like it. When you introduce somebody external, now that person can point out things in you that you don't want pointed out. And so now I have somebody else I have to deal with. Not only am I dealing with my wife, but now you got somebody else that wants to tell me if I'm wrong. Now, it could work to my advantage, and the counselor could say that she's wrong. Cool, I'm down with that. But there's a variable in there. So at the end of the day, it's a lot safer for me to control it myself, and it's a lot easier if I don't have to confront somebody else or allow somebody else to confront me. So going to a counselor means that I have to be vulnerable. And a lot of men don't like to do that.
Do you think that counseling is important?
It's necessary. I mean, having the ability to have someone else literally see you from outside looking in, because in the midst of a marriage, 9 times out of 10, you always feel as though you're right based off of pride. And, with me, all I could do is think about the counseling sessions that I had prior to marriage. And the very first thing that I always focused on were the issues that my wife had. I never focused on self. It was always a negative connotation of, okay, I'm pointing out these negative factors about her, but never saw myself the entire time. Counseling exposes those things, just like you said, Rick. It puts me in a position where, wow, I didn't know I had an anger problem, or wow, I didn't know I was impatient. But she's been telling my wife could have been telling me the whole entire time, but it may take a second or a third person to actually have me acknowledge what the issue really is, which I may not have known was never there. But now with this third party speaking, it's like, wow, I do see I had an issue in this area. So that's how counseling helps me.
I was going to say to that as well, what I find interesting is that we all get counseling, but it's like, where do we go get our counseling from? Before we became Christians and really started giving our life to God, we were getting counseling from the world. We get counseling from our boys. And so we were going to the wrong source and then getting the wrong information. And so oftentimes we say we don't want counseling, but we do go get counseling because we start talking to other people about it, and then we get bad information. And so it reminds me, Proverbs says, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. So that tells me that we all get counseling, but it's just, where do you get it from?
So how do we encourage men to get counseling?
I guess one way to do it is to communicate, to talk about it, and to remove the negative stigmatism around counseling, right? Because I think one of the ways is for people who are successful in life or in marriage and that have received counseling to be vulnerable enough to communicate that. Because I think a lot of times, I know one of the things I really appreciate about you, Dad, is while all of us that are under the anointing that's on your life, we honor you, we respect you, and we place you in a certain position so you can speak into our lives. You are vulnerable enough to say, even from the pulpit, the challenges that you've had, and you talk about yourself, right? And so when you are that vulnerable, we're like, wow, if Pastor Tony, Apostle Tony dealt with things, then obviously I don't feel as bad because I deal with things too, right? And so I think it's important for those of us that have healthy relationships and successful marriages to be open and honest about the fact that maybe we didn't go to formal counseling, like it wasn't an appointment. But we do, like we all receive counsel, like Ian said, from somebody. So if we can just remove the negative stigmatism away from counseling, then I think people may be more open to it.
I also feel like it's a matter of having a bad perspective on self-sufficiency. I think as men, we get taught to handle everything ourselves. It's, hey, you got to be a man. And to be a man means that you can deal with the life as it gets thrown at you. And so when we run into situations that we can't deal with, We don't know to go to anyone else or to communicate with others or to seek the answer outside of ourselves because that's weakness or because it's not even an option. And so a lot of times we can shoot ourselves in the foot because the answer that we need to solve all of our problems is not something that's found within ourselves. Especially as Christians, man, we should know that we aren't self-sufficient. We all rely on God. And a lot of times God chooses to reveal himself through our community and through people around us. So I think another way of encouraging men to seek the proper counseling is to understand that, in your community, God is there waiting for you in the people around you. And so if you can choose to say, hey, I know that I need God because I am not self-sufficient, then I'm going to seek whoever is around me that's going to be good counsel to speak into my life, because that's the only way that I know that I'll grow is by continually chase after and get more of God.
That's good. It reminds me of something that happened to me personally. I was among a bunch of preachers, and they were all telling their stories of their children. And they were rough. And I heard how bad theirs was. And, man, I got healing off of there. I'm like, man, mine is good then. But that's why I think we need to have community. We need to talk about it. Hey, listen, you're not the only one that's struggling with some things. You're not the only one having some challenges with your children, challenges with your relationships. And I think you'll find healing when we get a chance to talk about it. And that's what we want to do in this panel discussion, is to talk about these things so that we desire that you will be healed as a result of it. I want to ask this question. I've been talking about the illusion of control, because to me, control is just an illusion. You really don't have control of anything. And people who try to have relationships where they're controlling relationships, they're just setting themselves up to be just totally aggravated and agitated because, God never called us to control outcome in our relationships. And so I've used this statement that the course and quality of life will be greatly influenced by what we're willing to let go. I say that the course and quality of our life will be greatly influenced by what we're willing to let go. So my question to my panel discussion people is, what are some of the things as men that we need to let go to have healthy relationships?
Well, I go back to what Rick said earlier. I think the first thing is pride. So oftentimes we have so much pride built up inside of us that we feel like we need to be in control of everything that we're doing or everything that's in our environment, everything that's in our vision. And so if we learn how to let go of pride, which is very difficult oftentimes, honestly, and it could be pride in your relationship, it could be pride in the church, it could be pride in your job. Pride will cause you to fall. And I guess the scripture does talk about it. Pride goes before the fall, and great is that fall. So you have to be able to say, okay, let me be vulnerable and be naked again before my spouse, before whomever I'm having a relationship or an encounter with. That will allow me to allow people to see me for who I am. Oftentimes, the way I grew up, you always heard, what happens in this house stays in this house. That's a pride thing, because we don't want outside people to see what's really going on the inside. And so if I would say you get rid of pride, then it allows you to be naked before your spouse and then allow you room to grow.
I would say, too, that, I was raised in a culture where men are in charge and really in a male chauvinistic type culture as a Dominican. And even to the point where there's a lot of things I didn't do as a young man. I joined the Army. I had never washed a load of laundry. And so, my shirts came out, all my white shirts were pink. I'd washed it with some red in there. So I never ironed my clothes before. I worked, but those things I just didn't do. And the way I was raised, like, women do this and men do that. And in that type of culture, the challenge is that, you're told you're in charge. You're the man. You're in charge and all that. And so to the point of the question is, what do you have to let go? Like, I know for me, I had to learn how I don't have to always get the last word. I don't always have to say or if you meet people that say, hey, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I just want to let everybody know I'm in charge. Well, then if you have to keep saying you're in charge, you're probably not in charge, right? And so there was a lot of things that I messed up because I was always like, hey, I'm the man, or I'm in charge, or I have to get the last word. And then I would say something, and then if my wife would say something, then no, I'm getting the last word. And so at the end of the day, like, you have to learn how to just rest in the fact that you are who you are. God has called you to be who God has called you to be, and you don't have to force it on anybody. If you just learn how to become that person, people will honor it, people will respect it. And so you have to literally die to self and the things that you learn, like me, from the world that were not like God.
I would say I noticed that sometimes throughout life you're going to go through some difficult situations. You're going to encounter different pains and different things within your life. And one thing I've noticed, like within my relationship, I had to let go of that hard heart towards being receptive to love. And one of the things is God will actually use that person, your spouse or the person that you're dating, to experience a deeper depth of his love, to experience his heart towards you. And if you hold on to that hard heart, or you hold on to you're too masculine or it's too masculine to receive love, then you won't be able to experience another depth or another dimension of who the Father is. And I think being vulnerable and being receptive towards love is one of the biggest things that we could teach our young men, and specifically teach individuals within relationships.
That's good. You know, women in your generation, in your culture, well, men were taught to be in control. But today's women, they want to be in control. So that wouldn't work in today's culture. The women are aggressive. They know what they want, and they're trying to dictate pace, dictate control. So how do you deal with that with today's women that are not like, you know, you were brought up that men should be in charge. Men should make the decision. Men should make control. We know that's totally different now. So I mean, how do we deal with that today? How do we help relationships to be successful when it doesn't work that way anymore? You know that. Women are not like that today, right? They're very aggressive, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think it's kind of like twofold, because I can't, speak for all women,
right.
But for a lot of women that I know, you're right. They are choosing to take or wrestle back control. The dynamic between the relationship has always kind of been, like you said, male chauvinistic, and the male is going to be, I'm in charge, and the woman's like, okay, yeah, you're in charge. And a lot of women I've found that are, like you said, being aggressive, or, saying, hey, like, being, maybe a little bit more like harsh about like what they're willing to kind of give, and being more, demanding about what they say that they want and what they need. A lot of them aren't, they're still looking for a man to take care of their needs. They have not gotten too far away from the tradition. It's just that because, thank God that, they have been encouraged to say, hey, you shouldn't have to put yourself on the back burner. It just so happens that they're maybe like pushing it a little too much on the perspective of having to be aggressive, and it has to be combative towards people. But for the most part, once they have settled their heart that you're the person that they like, then they're like, okay, you're the man. You should be doing this. You get the same expectations. I'm aggressive with you, but I also want you to handle everything. So to combat that is, especially as a man, I feel like being able to be vulnerable first. A lot of times women have had to be vulnerable first. They're the ones that have had to make the sacrifices first. They're the ones that have had to, be like, well, I'm trying to get my husband or my boyfriend or whatever to go to counseling with me. I'm trying to get them to look for help. I'm trying to get him to open up. Well, I feel like as a man in this day and age, dealing with that, I feel like for me, it's like if I can choose to be vulnerable first, if I can lead us in being vulnerable, then they don't have to worry about putting up a combative front to get what they want, or to feel like their needs have to be met. The only way they can be met is if they fight me for them. It's like, no, if I tell you, hey, I'm ready to step to the plate to meet your needs and to get a chance to know you and to build a connection with you, then you get rid of all of the need for the tussle and the fighting. And I found that they're very willing and receptive to doing that, for sure.
So what's your viewpoint on aggressive women?
I personally like it. I'm not gonna lie. I I'm a very straightforward type of person. So if you come to me and you like, hey, I like you, I want you, and this is, you know, how I am as a person, and I want you to get a chance to meet, to get a chance to know me, and I want to get a chance to know you, then I'm gonna respond very positively to that. The only time it really becomes a problem is, like we've said before, like people having past hurts and past pains. It's hard for whether you're a man or a woman to not have those things kind of come back up, and those things will come up in that aggression where a need will not be met in a moment, or there may be a misunderstanding, and then it's like, well, you're just like, you know, my father who was bad, or this person I know who had a bad relationship, or you're just like this person, because that aggression is coming from them desiring to protect themselves. And so if they feel like you become a threat, then it's no longer building a connection. We're on the same team. It's we're gonna fight. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not respecting me. You're not trying to understand me. You're not taking care of me when I am trying to present myself to you. And so that's the only time it really becomes a problem. But outside of that, I enjoy not, needing to force women to tell me what they want and what they need. It helps both of us come to the conclusion whether or not it's going to work out a lot quicker.
It leads me to this question. I hear this a lot of time in counseling. Men always say, she don't respect me. She don't respect me. That seems like that's a running statement for married men that go through counseling. A need to be respected. How do you guys feel about that? I mean, is that something that is real, or is that just something that we just come up with because they make it? It's all. I just, it comes from this statement that I hear all the time. How come my wife never apologizes? How come I'm always the first one that have to apologize? And so I think born out of that is this idea that I feel not respected. And so what is your thought about men always have to apologize first?
Well, I don't know if that's, well, I know it's not the case, right? I mean, it's not a fact, but I mean, people do say that. Why do men have to apologize first? So I would just say that from that perspective, because men, and what I'm about to say is a generality, right? So I don't, but in general, men are left brain dominant and women are right brain dominant. So men are matter of fact and women are more emotional. And so that being the case, if we have an argument, and I know as a man, like just logically speaking, we have an argument. Right now we're in the middle of the argument. In a few minutes we're going to bed. I want something when I go to bed. I want this to be over. For this to be over, there needs to be an apology. I apologize. You know what I mean? Hey, I will knock this out. Because it's just a matter of fact. For us, it's black and white. I don't care. I do whatever I got to do to get ready for tonight. And so whatever I got to do to make sure that tonight is good, I will say, I'm sorry. I'll rub your feet. I don't care what you want me to do. Right? So I think men, because we're just matter of fact, and it's like boom, 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 boom. Whereas women, they have to, the right brain dominant, they have to go through this whole experience. Like if you left the toilet seat up this morning, you left the toilet seat up, and now you didn't call her all throughout the day, and then now you talking about, hey, he was like, no, you left the toilet seat up this morning. You can't even remember what you did 5 minutes ago as a man. And so you don't, I think that's one of the things is you apologize first because you just want to get it over with. Whereas women, they want this, it's just different.
I'll also say, it goes back to communicating. Oftentimes, as men, we don't necessarily communicate our feelings and what's really going on. And so to your point, what Rick was saying, it's like there may be something that happened earlier, and all of a sudden we allow it to build up. And so now when you blow up, you're blowing up from a place of the build up, and they were looking at you like, okay, what just happened? And so now, of course, you're having to apologize because you were holding on to something that happened some time ago that is now showing up in this conversation. And so I'll also say we also teach people how to treat us. And, when you teach a person that it's okay for you to behave this way towards me, inevitably at some point in time, you're going to have to attempt to make amends to it. So now you don't like how you've been treated. And so now you're putting yourself in a position of attempting to correct it, and you're correcting it the wrong way. And so if you can teach early on in a relationship what this looks like, how, and I'm not saying teach from the standpoint of, hey, I'm teaching you, but it's how do you allow somebody to respect you and how do you respect them? And when there is no level of respect, because early on, to be honest, we all wanted one thing, you know. I mean, yeah, we're saved now, but we wanted one thing. And when we were attempting to get that thing, it didn't matter what it looked like. So we allowed behaviors that sometimes you didn't agree with it. But then now you're saying, okay, I don't like it anymore. And now you're lashing out at it. And so it may appear that you're the first one to apologize. And I tell you, and I go with Rick, that's not the case, because my wife apologizes a lot too, you know, but it's being able to communicate honestly with each other to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling.
I think it's also important for us to understand what is the issue also. I think as men, sometimes, as Elder Rick mentioned, we could be so black and white that we immediately want to hurry up and apologize to get the situation over. But I found that to avoid conflict going forward and such is to have an understanding. So what are your triggers? What is it that led up to this event and such? And that way now I don't have to necessarily Monday night quarterback and such. I now know, okay, these are the things that will lead up to a certain type of conflict, and I know now not to do these things to fuel that type of energy and such. So now I'm actually now stepping in a position of actually covering you. I'm being cautious. I'm showing you love, demonstrating you love, and now I command respect. Now I'm commanding that respect from you because now I am respecting you, and I'm empowering that within you because I've made a decision not to just apologize, but I made a decision, let me actually understand what exactly are you thinking, what exactly are you going through. And yes.
I am the exact opposite. I hear everything y'all saying, but I feel like with me, a lot of times when I'm in relationships with people, I'm the one with with more emotional intelligence. I'm the one that's like, hey, this is how I feel, this is what's going on with me. I could definitely still be too analytical and too black and white for sure, but I'm definitely the one like, hey, I want to talk. This is a problem. Let's address this. And I deal with a lot of women who aren't as confrontational as I am. And I think that at the end of the day, it comes down to, like you said, it's left brain and right brain, but it's still the brain. We are still this people in general, and as people, we just want to be seen. And a lot of times men view that in the avenue of respect, and women view that as an avenue of love. You didn't do this thing for me, or you didn't respond to me in this way, and so I don't feel seen. And because I don't think you see me right now, I don't think you respect me. You don't respect my presence. Because you didn't do this thing that I expected you to do, I don't think you see me right now, so you must not love me because I'm not in your view. And so I think an important part of combating that is what you all were saying. It's about being willing to teach and being willing to listen and willing to understand. Because when you can understand the other person, when you can take the time to see each other, then you don't have that problem anymore.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. You know, we've talked about one of the keys to having a good relationship is just renewing your mind. And, you know, I like what Paul said. He says to not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so I think for all of us, it's important that we not to conform to our culture, not conform to the world, not conform to the way the world is doing things in order to have a healthy and strong relationship. And, you know, I talked about, you know, one of the things that happens to all of us is that, you know, we're fed thoughts and into our mind that grow up and produce things in our life that are negative, that are not healthy, that are not good for relationships. And being able to identify those things are important because your ability to identify those seeds that were sown will cause you to uproot those things and then to have the kind of relationship that you desire. And so my question is, you know, I know when you first got married, there was some seeds, some thoughts in you from your family. And when you begin to get married, you realize some of these thoughts and things that wasn't good for your relationship. Can you identify some of those things that you had to uproot in order to have a strong relationship with your spouse?
Absolutely. It goes back to something Ian mentioned earlier about, you know, getting knowledge from unsaved people. And you know, all I could think about is off of actually a testimony. I mean, my dad, during his marriage, one of the things that he would actually tell me is that every now and then you have to upset your wife to know that she cares, that she has emotion. I'm like, okay.
Say that again.
He used to actually tell me, give me directives that in order for you to know that your wife loves you, you literally have to do something to upset her so you can get an emotion or you can get a reaction from her. And needless to say that I don't know how they're still together. It is a God, first of all, but that foundation wasn't based on the word at all. But that was one of the main things that I had to uproot is stop nitpicking, stop having such negative connotation, because I found out that was the seed of what it was, negative. You know, not looking at it in a positive light. There's always something wrong. It's always, a stressful situation. And realizing that his background was a police officer, everything is law, okay? You react a certain way, here's the reaction, 1 + 1 = 2. There is no in between. Well, in order to uproot those things, I thought about the text, whatsoever, things are pure. Whatsoever things, if there's any virtue, if there's any praise, just think on those things. And that's how I developed my relationship. That's how I uprooted that seed of negativity, is basically what it was.
Yeah, Dad, I'll mention too, I was just thinking here, I got so many examples because I was raised with a pretty strong culture that a lot of those things are not like God, right? But I'm just saying, so I'll give you 2 quick examples. One is I get married, I go back home to New York, and I go to my aunt's house, and one of my cousins, she's beautiful, and so she always had pretty friends, right? Like, pretty girls, they stick together. So I'm married now. I'm there with my wife, and my cousin is there with all these girls. And so my aunt is like, oh, which one of those do you like? I was like, hey, I'm married. And she was like, psh, you can have a chick on the side. And I'm like, what? And so this is like coming from my aunt too. Like if it was my uncle, I could understand because he did that. But I was like, so why would it come from the woman though? Like it was so ingrained in the culture that they expected. Like it was almost like she was like, oh, you think you better than us now? Like you not gonna have a chick on the side? I was like this is so messed up. Like your thinking is so warped, right? So that's one thing that was just straight up crazy. Another one was I take care of my kids, right? So I change diapers, Pampers, or I cook and stuff like that. Oh my God, I do that. And my cousin's like, yo, what are you doing? Like, you are setting the wrong example. Like, don't be doing that around here. People are going to get ideas and stuff. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I was like, you wiping bottoms and stuff? No, don't be doing that. And so, then my family, they would tell my wife, they'd tell Isabella, your husband is not Dominican. Your husband is not, because that, from a cultural perspective, as you're a man, you don't do none of that. Like, you don't have to worry about, you have kids, but you don't have to, touch them and clean them and feed them and none of that stuff because you're a man. And so these were things that I had to unlearn to be successful in my marriage.
And I'll add to that because I'll definitely say from a cultural perspective. I mean, I grew up, both of my parents are Jamaican. I was born in Jamaica, but I grew up in the States. And so you see a lot of strong, roles that are played. Like the man does this, the woman does that. And, even though we saw a lot of that, in my relationship, none of that would have worked. My wife was out there working and doing everything else, so it was like I had to be able to start learning how to cook. And well, I knew how to cook. I taught my wife to cook actually. She'll tell you. So when it was all said and done, it's the roles that we think traditionally that we have to play. It's like all of that goes out the window in this environment. And even to the point of seeing generationally what I had to go through. My dad had a spirit of anger on him. And, and I talked about it last week about that spirit of anger. And so that anger came on me. And then when I saw it in my son, it's like, okay, look, this got to stop somewhere. And so, one of the things that I saw growing up was I saw the physical abuse. And so it's like I said to myself, I did not want to be in that realm at all. And that happened one time while we were dating. And I'm like, oh, my God, I said, I will never be this guy. And so since that point forward, it never happened again. And so you have to, again, what you're saying, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Literally had to make a decision that this was not going to be my life. I did not want that at all. One of the other decisions I made was to what Rick was just sharing about was having, all these kids all over the place, being able to have women on the side. And I just said that wasn't going to be me, and I have a brother that is, maybe a couple years younger than me. And there's at least 3 or 4 baby mothers that I know of. And I was just like, okay, that's not going to be my life. And so, again, you have to make that decision and just say, okay, God. And, again, it's whatever words that we say, what we speak, right? So I spoke the word that this is not going to be me, and then you start living by that. So you got to get rid of some of those, generational curses and the mindset of this is what traditionally a man and a woman should do.
I want to ask this question. What stereotypes about men that you want women to know that is not true about men?
I would say one is that we don't have any feelings. I think a lot of times, and I think even we as men, we kind of portray this too, that we don't have any feelings, and it's always said that men, they don't feel anything. They're just straightforward, 1, 2, 3. And I think all of us have feelings. I think we all have a soul. The Bible even talks about us having a soul, which is made up of our mind, will, and our emotions. And I think as we work on actually improving and our soul prospering and such like that, that will put us in a position to connect to people better and also build more meaningful relationships.
I have this question. As single men, what are the rules of engagement in dating as a Christian? What are, if you can, the do's and don'ts, if they do exist?
I would say first, having a relationship with God is number one, the first part. It's important for both you and whoever you're dating to have a relationship with our Father. Starting from there, from the beginning, will help you begin to develop an understanding of who you are, to actually begin to know what the Father has said about you. And as you discover who you are and such, then you can, get some insight as to, okay, what exactly do I like? What do I dislike? And following that, I think finding somebody that you can have a connection with that is meaningful, something that you could actually see yourself actually kind of building a life or a relationship that's bigger than that microwave kind of relationship. And then actually working on that intimacy. Now you're going through a journey. Now I need to figure out exactly, who your family is, where are you from, what's your background, what are you studying, what exactly do you want to accomplish within life. You're building now something together, and you're trying to see like whether or not you all can coexist, but throughout all of this, you're keeping that relationship with the Father first, and then He ends up producing the outcome. I think some of the don'ts in that would be trying to, of course, be controlling, trying to force something to happen, trying to make somebody love you, trying to make somebody have this connection with you. I think those are complete don'ts that you should not engage in. But I think as you take on the course of having that relationship with the Father and then spending time getting to know one another and building that solid foundation within a relationship, I think that can lead to either a successful relationship or, we weren't meant together and we go our separate ways.
These were audience questions, and I want to ask this one too. What to do when you have a bitter wife and she alienates the children against the father for her gratification? We got some really good questions that really need counseling, to be truthfully honest. Because a lot of times things are happening, but they might not be happening as you perceive it to be happening. And so my first suggestion is to go get some counseling, go get some help, bring somebody in on that, because if that's the case, that can be easily fixed. But does anybody want to speak to that one?
Well, I would just say that hurt people hurt people. And so in that particular situation, obviously, I agree that the couple needs counseling, because it is never okay for a spouse to weaponize their children. So basically, now I'm gonna turn the kids against you, or I'm gonna use the kids as like a pawn on the chessboard, and use the kids to maneuver what I want to get what I want out of the relationship. That's manipulation. That's not really a healthy relationship at all. So in that type of situation, I would say, yes, you do need counseling. You need somebody to intervene. And you need both of you, obviously. There has to be a certain level of healing for that, so that the kids are not impacted as well. So not only do you want the marriage to survive, but you don't want there to be lasting impact on the children, to where the children acknowledge and recognize that they were actually used as weapons against their own father. That would be terrible.
That is so true. Here's another question that came from the audience. How do you deal with disagreement?
Dealing with disagreement is simply just having open communication. It's literally being honest. You know, Roger said you got to be emotional. You have to be transparent. You literally need to be able to have a conversation with your spouse and being real about it. Now, one thing I will say is raising your voice is never going to solve anything. And so getting into your emotions from the standpoint of anger or being upset is not going to resolve it. You have to have a conversation and just having an open conversation. And oftentimes you may just need to remove yourself from that situation at that point in time. So if something just rose up, maybe you're not going to talk about it right then. You can resolve and say, let's just table this for the next day and then go on a date. Set aside a time when you can actually talk about what that trigger was. And I would also say, understand your triggers. You know, a lot of times we get caught up into situations or emotionalism, which causes us to be angry and not recognizing what that seed of anger was. And so if you can begin to recognize what those seeds are, then you can get rid of the seed before it begins to blossom into something that you can't control.
I will also say that what I'm about to say is not going to apply to 100% of disagreements, but it does apply to probably a lot of them, and that's just go back to the word. So one of the things that Isabella and I have is this agreement. We have an agreement that the word is the final answer, right? So if there's something, like you got to have something that's common ground. I think Butch was talking about somebody that was a police officer, right? You always go back to the law. So whatever the law is, so somebody's right, somebody's wrong, you know? And so we used to sing this song, the Bible is right and somebody's wrong. And so at the end of the day, if one of you two is against the word, then whichever one is lining up with the word is the one that's right. End of story, right? So you go to the word. Now, like I said, it's not going to apply 100% of the time, but if somebody is like outside of the word of God, then you have to be like, okay, listen, the word is the ruler by which we're going to judge decisions. Let's go to the word.
I would just also add, be willing to compromise. Just be willing to find a middle ground. If there's some type of disagreement that we have, you have to be willing to kind of work towards some type of resolution that we both can get something from it.
So I was going to ask Elder Rick, so if going back to the word, so what if the guy says, the Bible says the man is the head of the house, and we're just going to go by the scriptures and that's it?
Yeah, so that's not really compromise, right? So at the end of the day, that's like saying, big joker, bam, let me just use this one scripture. No, I mean, I'm just saying, like, you have to, like, be reasonable to have a relationship without question.
I think that anything that's going to be good in your relationship has to be built. And so naturally, with anyone you come across, you're going to have disagreements with them. Why? Because you're your own person, you have your own set of experiences, your own life that you've been through. And so if I talk to somebody long enough, we're going to figure out all the things we disagree about. And so where you go from there is you start to build agreements. Does that mean at the end result of our conversation, of us being vulnerable, of us speaking, that we're going to say, hey, we've all come to the same conclusion as far as how we view the world? No, you're not supposed to become the same person and view everything the exact same way. But you learn the person in that disagreement, and you work together to build an agreement based upon what you learn about each other, where you take the strengths of what both of you have to bring to build out the desired, the better outcome. The best parts of both of you come together to make an agreement. And a lot of times, some of those things can be easy and it's nice, but it becomes very difficult when some of those disagreements are like parts of us, where we're like, well, you know, my daddy, he did it like this, and you know, and you feel very strongly about that. And that even goes back to just things that we have to learn to lose, things we have to learn to just loose, is not being so tight on our own perspectives and learning that in our relationship that we are more committed to building something than keeping something that we had.
That's very good.
I hope you enjoyed that special men's panel as much as I did. They were really sharing some important nuggets in regards to relationships. I hope you walked away with some things you can consider and both apply to your life. You know, the most important relationship that any of us could ever have is our relationship with God. And so if you have been watching tonight and you say, hey, I want to connect with God, I want to establish a relationship with Him, then we would love to pray with you for that. There's some information that's coming on the screen, and if you reach out to us, we would love to give you a call and pray with you for whatever it is you would like prayer for, whether that is making a decision to invite Jesus into your life for the first time, or rededicating your life to God, or prayer for anything, or just connect to our ministry, you can do that by the information that's on the screen. And tonight, we don't want to close out this time that we've had together without giving you an opportunity to give. Look, every time we gather together, we always want to take time to sow into the kingdom of God and what God is doing in the earth. Every time you sow, you are believing God for him to do something great in your life. And he's given us a promise that he will do just that he will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. It is totally supernatural to sow something with our natural finances and see God do something supernatural as a result. And so there's some information, again, coming up on the screen about how you can give and sow into the work of God. So join us here next week as we continue on this special topic of relationships